Hey guys, how's it going? Jazzy here. I know it's been a while since I put up a real video on the channel. I apologize. I've kind of been taking some time off, getting caught up on some other games. I've started streaming a little bit, so if you guys haven't caught me there yet, it's twitch.tv/jazzy_gaming. I'm trying to do that on like the weekends and stuff like that. Don't really have a set day yet, but if you go ahead and just follow me there, you'll get an email when I go live. So also, if you're following me on Twitter, it posts to there as well. So today I want to talk about Wildstar, and not in the way that I usually do. Typically I try to stay very positive about Wildstar. It's a great game. I love it. I love the community around it. The devs are good people. They interact with the community very well. That being said, we all know that there are some problems in Wildstar. And basically today, I just wanted to kind of just get some ideas out there that I had. Just talk about some things that I haven't really before. So for once, this video is not going to be all sunshine and rainbows about Wildstar from me. So sorry, but sometimes we have to do that. So as I said, I love the game. It's great. Obviously there are some issues going on with the game. I will say 3 things that I will never fault Wildstar for. One, they had an incredible launch. One of the best I've ever seen from an MMO. And beyond that, they were DDoS attacked during the launch, and it still went very smoothly. The only thing, queue times for servers, but that's to be expected within, any launch to an MMO. That's something that you're just going to have happen. But even with a DDoS attack, servers were stable. There wasn't, hardly any performance loss. I mean, there was a little bit to be expected again, but nothing that was, hindering or game breaking. Servers were stable. Nothing was crashing. It went exceedingly well. So props to them for that. Amazing. The second thing is their housing. Wildstar housing is definitely the most robust housing system I have ever seen. It allows for more customization than any other one I know of out there. Just with the custom placement of the items and everything, it's fantastic. I love it. Obviously, it's had some of its own little bugs and issues, but the system as a whole is amazing. The next best one that I know of is Rift, and theirs is really good too, so that's saying something. The third thing for me is the combat. I love Wildstar's combat so much. That is probably my favorite thing about the game. I love the skill base, the action. Action games outside of MMOs are typically my favorite kind of game. So to kind of add all those elements into an MMO, that's heaven for me. So now we get to the not so happy part. One of the biggest things that has been a problem since the beginning of the game is PvP. And it's a shame because that amazing combat system would translate really well to PvP. But PvP has been broken from the beginning. Whether you look at things, like the win trading or selling, it was really easy to game the system for ratings. That became a problem where people just couldn't, get to where they wanted to do unless they cheated. So that kind of sucked. People would tank their ratings on purpose, come back, just face roll people, and it prevented people who wanted to do it legitimately from being able to progress. So a lot of people got frustrated and left. Another thing that affected not only PvP but also PvE was the itemization. It wasn't as good as it could have been. The random factor idea was kind of cool at first. It sounded interesting to me, admittedly, before I really got into the nitty-gritty of, the end game and everything. I didn't max out in beta simply because I wanted to save some content for the live game, so I never experienced it until I actually got there in the live game. And it did get frustrating because it was just so random. It was really hard to kind of optimize for, trying to get into rating and things like that, between runes and stats and just all kinds of things like that. It just made it really difficult, and PvP also suffered from that as well. And obviously they're doing things now to address those issues, but I feel like that's one of those things that if they hadn't done that in the beginning, it might have helped to ease some frustration of, what's going on now. And along with that, there was the problem of the gear curve. The fact that crafted gear remained some of the best gear in the game, simply because it was just too powerful, until you got into raiding, was not a good thing. Not only, one, just logically, that's not good, that your crafted gear that takes, almost no effort to get is better than anything you can get from actually playing the game. And therein lies the other problem, is that, when you just can craft a bunch of gear and be ready to raid, what are you going to do when you're not raiding? It's, things like the adventures and the dungeons, and, they're not meant to be exceedingly difficult, but they're meant to keep you playing the game. So if you're not, essentially farming adventures or dungeons to get your gear, then you're going to get bored and you're probably going to quit the game. It's just one of those things. So the other thing that kind of became an issue as well was the attunement process. I'm sure many of you know that I have always been in favor of attunements, but I can also freely admit the Wildstar one was not set up well. It was a little bit of overkill in the beginning, and also just kind of set up in a kind of odd, random way. One thing that Wildstar kind of based itself on, obviously, anybody who's been playing the game knows that, they went with that hardcore, like everything has to be hard and everything has to be hardcore. And I think there were times that they might have confused, hardcore with time consuming. Now, I'm not against time gates. I think that they should exist too. Again, it's an MMO. There needs to be a reason to keep you in the game. But I think that if they have a time gate, they need to make it not obvious that it's a time gate. It needs to be something that is fun and engaging. And things like, the huge rep grind to Exalted with your faction was not a fun thing, and it was an obvious grind and just not a good thing to have in there. And I never had a problem with the medals for dungeons. I think that it was good to have. I didn't have a problem with silver. I still to this point have not started raiding, but I think that, and from everything I've seen, I've watched streams and videos and things like that, and I've raided, competitively in other games. So, I have a basic concept of what it's about. And I think that if somebody couldn't really do the silvers, I feel like they're probably not still going to be ready for raiding. But in order for Wildstar to kind of, I don't want to say cater, but to include a somewhat more casual audience into at least stepping into raiding, they had to drop that medal requirement from silver to bronze. And then the other thing about the attunement, the world bosses, which was obviously also meant to be a time gate. What they've done now is made it so if you've killed those bosses while leveling, when you get to that step in the attunement, it will count it, basically. So you don't have to be on that step and then go back and kill the bosses again. This makes sense to me, that it would be that way. Again, it's another thing that I didn't mind, but some people saw it as just an annoying, time sink. It was hard to find groups for it because, most people would only do it if they were trying to get their attunement done, which was few and far in between. Now you see a lot of times, people setting up groups or calling it out like, hey, this boss is up, hey, this boss is up, and people will go and do it even if they're not on that step because, it counts now, which is a great thing to do. So I really think that's really going to be helpful. Another thing, they recently put in the mega servers. I think a lot of these problems that I've talked about already compounded into a huge issue that we saw a large drop-off in population very rapidly. They had said they planned to do mega servers from the beginning, but just didn't have the time to get it in. I don't know if that's true or not, or if it was actually in response to the population drop. Either way, this has been a good change from what I've seen so far, at least for North America. I've heard of some issues on the EU side, and also in the North American servers, the PvP mega server is suffering quite a bit because a lot of the large competitive guilds decided to move from the PvP to the PvE server, which is something I also did because I didn't want to be on a mega server for PvP. I'm actually not really a fan of mega servers, quite honestly, but I really, really like Wildstar, and I really, really want to keep playing it. But I've seen a lot of events going on and a lot of, people trying to drum up some kind of community there for the PvP servers, and I wish them well. And part of the problem, I think, is that they offered transfers from PvP to PvE, but did not offer it in the other direction. I think that's also something that has recently been changed. I saw something about it on Twitter the other day, or will be changed, so don't quote me on it 100%. You can probably look it up on the forums if you're interested in something like that. So that should help again. Another thing that was kind of a big blow to Wildstar was that they announced that they had to stop the progression, what's the word I'm looking for? The content cycle they were on. There we go. I'll get it eventually. The releases, the content was coming, once a month. We got something every single month, and that was also a selling point for Wildstar, excuse me. And they had to come back, we were getting patches that were buggy, and some fix was breaking something else, and it just wasn't working very well. So something that they had to do is step back and say, okay, we can't release content patches every month. We have to hold them back, and we're going to do them every 3 to 4 months instead. Basically, this is probably a thing that drove population out of the game as well. I hate to say it, but it's really hard nowadays to release an MMO that is not damn near perfect at the beginning. It's all about first impressions with the MMO community. A lot of people are spoiled by games like WoW that have been out for, 10 years, and they have 10 years of polish behind them. Now, we all, who have played WoW, we know that engine and that, art style and everything, it's aged. It just doesn't look as good. But what people want now is the shine of the new game with the polish of the 10-year-old game. And they're not very forgiving. So if you don't make that first impression, you really lose people. And it's unfortunate, because for all the things Wildstar's done right, it's kind of stumbled or fallen, basically, because of, these early issues, where if this game had released even 4 or 5 years ago, when they were, first getting into big, deep development of the game before they scrapped it and essentially started over, it probably wouldn't have been as harsh as it is now. So that in of itself, them having to step back and say, okay, we can't release content as much, that kind of hurt it, because that was a selling point for them, that they would be releasing constant content, basically. So that hurt them. Another thing that went along with that when they announced it was that they would not be having holidays this year. A lot more people were disappointed in that than I expected. Personally, I figured that at least Halloween would have been canceled when they announced that they were going to the quarterly content cycle rather than monthly. It just made logical sense to me. And I was kind of ready to accept that. I was okay. But then when they said, that the Christmas holiday was being canceled too, that really hurt them quite a bit. It's a huge holiday drought, and that's a time when a lot of people are, off of school. People take vacations, they have family hanging out, and a lot of people will play games during that time. And it's a really good time to get people, have drivers to get people into your game and want to play it and stay subscribed, especially on this, monthly subscription model. You have to have drivers to keep people in your game. Now, I know at the end of September, I was fearing that there would be another, drop in people. And it was definitely noticed the first week of October that it was getting a lot harder to find queues. There was just less people in town. There was just a lot of people just gone. And I think that really is a big part of it. And whether those people are gone permanently or people are taking a break, essentially, until, drop 3 and drop 4 in January, who knows? It's hard. I think that once people leave your game, it's really hard to convince them to come back, especially when you have kind of the rocky start that Wildstar has had. And for all the things that they're getting slammed about through, all of it, they had a little period there where they kind of had to keep quiet for a little while, but they are still listening. And I hate to, I don't want to just say all the bad things, but definitely they do listen and they do respond to what we want. And more so than any other development studio I've ever seen, they are on top of it. And they're working, as much as they can to do what they can. So sometimes you have to be patient. But the most recent thing that has come that has kind of been a bad PR thing for them is they recently had to lay off about 60 people. There were some big names that actually left the company, and I actually did a video with Bazile where I talked with him in depth about how we felt about that, but I'll touch on it briefly here as well. Big names like Bitwise and Kevin Lee, who was the lead PvP guy, Nobob, who was a raid and dungeon designer. I mean, just big stuff like that. And they said that order came down from NCSoft, so it wasn't Carbine specifically. And it wasn't just Carbine that was hit by that, too. It was also, Aeon and their other games. Everyone other than Guild Wars, basically, was hit with this layoff and restructuring, basically. Because it looks like NCSoft wants to move more into mobile gaming, which is kind of a odd thing. But again, if you want to hear, more about what I think on that topic specifically, I'll leave a link to that video and you can go check out that. I won't go too far into that. But basically, the point I wanted to make there is that it wasn't a good public image thing. And the sad thing is that it came on the heels of what was kind of a good, they had a nice little upward trend going because of mega servers dropping, and, they implemented them well. There was little issue. I think there was one very minor issue where it was a visual issue on the cred exchange where it wasn't showing the right buy price, and it was fixed within like 10 minutes of the mega servers coming up. So it was incredible. It was beautiful. They implemented it extremely well, and it was a good sign, and it gave people hope. And then maybe a week later they announced the layoffs at Carbine, so it just didn't look good. And I think that all of these things coupled together just has led to, I think, a lot of people taking a break kind of from Wildstar. I can definitely say I'm playing less, not for lack of, I don't hate the game. I'm not quitting the game, obviously. But I really don't have anything to do. A lot of people are waiting on drop 3 for a lot of those changes, and then also drop 4. So it's just, there's really nothing for me to do in the game. I can't, it's hard to find a group that I can raid with, because a lot of people are kind of in the same boat, that they're, either taking a break, or they've just, stopped playing until that stuff comes. So that also doesn't look good for the game. It doesn't look good for the numbers and when people completely stop playing, which obviously, saying that, I know I'm kind of contributing to the problem, but I am still subscribed. I still log in at least every other day. I've got boom boxes to open, so that's always fun. But all in all, there's a lot of things that they need to kind of work on. Oh, one more thing, actually, before I forget. Sorry, I know I've tried to end this like twice. 40-man rating. Just as a side note, there's a lot of guilds that have quit. A lot of the bigger, progression type guilds that play these MMOs, because they are fighting what they like to call the roster boss. That it's really hard, all these issues that might, push people out of the game, permanently or temporarily, are making it really hard for these big guilds to field a 40-man roster. And, all these big guilds are going to want to do the best content, the hardest content they can possibly do, because they want the prestige of having done it and, being first or whatever. But a lot of them have quit because they just can't do that. 20-man rating is not acceptable to them, basically, because 40-man is the best. I feel like 40-man rating doesn't really have a place in MMOs anymore. You always hear people say, oh, there's a reason that Blizzard got rid of it or whatever, that it's gone, basically. I have a theory for MMOs that a lot of the people who play MMOs, I think, are people that are, the probably 23 to 30 plus area. And, if you think back even 10 years ago, these people were in high school or whatever and didn't have any responsibilities or whatever. And nowadays, I think that audience has kind of grown with MMOs. I mean, obviously there's always new players coming in, but I feel like a majority of the MMO audience is that same generation that has been playing them for the last 10 years. But the problem is now, when those people were in high school or junior high or whatever, they had all the time in the world to commit to, 40-man rating. They could sit there all night and play games or whatever. But now they have, jobs and homes and families and just other things that they have to take care of. So they don't have the time to sit there, and do 6 hours of raiding every day of the week. So that's where 40-man raiding kind of fell apart and fell to the wayside, because it's just so much commitment and so much coordination to do it. Now, I think that they could still keep the difficulty that they're looking for, but lower it to that 20-man. and also appease, you know, their more casual audience and then also the hardcore at the same time. I was talking to a friend about this the other day, actually, that they could essentially implement like a hard mode of the 20-man. I know that they kind of want to do a separate thing. They could, you know, add extra bosses or things like that. Maybe not make their raids so massive in scale. That's another thing that would probably help save them time, because those raids are both gigantic and they really don't need to do that. If they made them, you know, smaller, they could put out more content more often and they could include raids in that. So I think that would help them as well with getting fresh content out to people. But I digress. Back to the point. I think they could make a hard mode of that raid. What they could do is make it so, let's say your normal version of your 20-man raid, you have like a mini attunement that you have to just complete adventures, complete the dungeons, and, you know, maybe do a couple little mini side quests or something. Just complete them. No medals, no anything like that. Just finish them. And you gain access to the 20-man raid. I think that's reasonable, and most people will probably do that, you know, just along the way, just gearing up to get in there. Now, for your hardcore people, you know, that want to do hard mode and the hardest stuff in the game, you take your hard mode 20-man and put that full attunement in it. The one that they've, you know, kind of adjusted now, that you can do your bronze medal dungeons, you finish the adventures, you do all the world bosses, you do all this other stuff. That can be for the people that want that prestige, that want to say, I did it when, you know, on this harder difficulty, that it was hard and I finished it. You know, and I feel like that would be a good compromise, because they have a problem where they can't really cater to a casual audience the way the game is set up. And that's where you get the people who are screaming about an attunement that takes too long to get into raids that are too hard for them to finish. And while I love the challenge that exists in Wildstar, I have to admit that the casual audience is what feeds an MMO, and you have to support your casual audience. There's just not enough of a hardcore audience that exists to support a game, which I think is also part of what we're seeing. So they need to kind of just take a step back and I think reevaluate what they're going to do, which they are coming in drop 3. They're focusing a lot more on, you know, solo gameplay and casual gameplay, and kind of working to support that play style as well. So I think if they can keep, you know, on that upward trend, that it will be a good thing, and that we can see Wildstar start to come back and be, you know, a good game, a good competitor to have in the MMO space. So, thank you guys for listening to my rant. Like I said, I know that this one wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, and I'm finally done. I really can't think of anything else I have to say at the moment. You guys can check me out, again, like I said, on twitch.tv/Jazzy_gaming. Can follow me on Twitter at Jazzy_gaming, and I will make sure to try and put up more videos more often and not be horrible at that. So, thank you guys, and I will see you guys next time.